If you have been feeling like you are getting exhausted with the clocking in and the clocking out and the working weekends and holidays and overtime, and really feeling like you are missing that freedom and longing for that control over your life and your schedule, then this episode is going to be for you. Nurses and nurse coaches, welcome back to the Nurse Coach Collective podcast. We're your hosts, Heather and Peter.
What's up, y'all? Welcome back. Today we're discussing how we went from the hospital to the home office and talking about our life as remote nurse coaches.
Working remotely. It's something that I never knew I would do, but now that I think about it, I always wanted to do. And the truth is, we've spent the last 7 years building our business that allows us to work remotely so that we get to reap all the benefits, like traveling the world and being with our family and being fully present for what I would call life's greatest moments.
Why are so many nurses interested in working remotely? I think it's because it stands in direct contrast to life inside the hospital. So life inside the hospital, you have to show up to a certain place at a certain time, be there for a certain length of time, and do that over and over again at the same physical location for a certain amount of days in a row. Versus working remotely, you can wake up, you can have your little morning routine, do your thing, and then you open up your laptop, and boom, you are there. It doesn't matter where you are. It doesn't matter your geographical location. It doesn't matter what time zone you're in. Sometimes it does, but it just gives you this whole new layer of freedom. And so I really believe that's why so many nurses are interested in remote work. And, me and you have been doing it since before it was cool, Heather. So I think we have a lot of experience to really lean on here.
Exactly. And that's a big reason why we wanted to create today's episode, because if you have been feeling like you are getting exhausted with the clocking in and the clocking out and the working weekends and holidays and overtime, and really feeling like you are missing that freedom and longing for that control over your life and your schedule, then this episode is going to be for you. We're going to share a bit of our personal story and what working remotely has opened up for us. And we'll also share some tips to help make stepping into remote work life as a nurse coach that much easier for you.
Yeah. And my hope with this episode is to do what one single book did for us, which is that it opened up a whole world of possibilities. It blew our worldview apart. And I hope that if this episode can do that for just one nurse, then I will be super, super stoked. So what was that book? Well, 7 or maybe 8 years ago now, unbeknownst to us, Heather and I were reading the same exact book at the same time. I personally hadn't read a book in forever. Heather, you were listening to an audio version of this book because you had a 2-hour commute at your job at the hospital.
That book was the only thing that would allow me to take my mind off of the impending shift, and I could flip on that audiobook and fly away to a nice little place for that long commute.
Hell yeah. So what was this magical book that changed everything for us? It was, drum roll, The 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss. Thank you, Tim Ferriss. Salute to you, sir. Man, that book was magical. And talk about the power of one insight. When we talk about nurse coaching and how it all boils down to this moment of insight and how that can change everything for you. For us, this book was that moment of true insight because it allowed me, I'll speak from my own personal experience, man, I came home so excited reading this book. I think I devoured the whole thing, and I just couldn't believe that the universe had allowed it so that you were also listening to this book, because it showed me just a whole new way to work. Full disclosure, I still haven't hit 4-hour work week yet.
Nope, not even close. Working on it, still working on it.
Still working on it. But the ideas inside of that book were quite profound, which is that the power of the internet to allow us to build businesses and to work remotely, and to do that all by using just a computer or a smartphone. I was like, what? When you're so used to going to work and going to a hospital and using your little badge and swiping in, and then you get a paycheck, but you have to be present for it. Like that was legit all I had known. And so, yeah, that book really shattered my worldview in just a fantastic way. And it sent me on this endless search for knowledge. I mean, I think I've read like 1,000 plus books over the last 7 years because and it was all sparked by that.
Literally hearing you say that there was a moment in time that you hadn't read a book in a long time is like, who's that Peter? I do not remember that version.
I don't
of
actually
Peter.
remember that version of Peter either. So yeah, Heather, I'm curious what that sparked for you. What did that book spark for you on your side?
If you were to ask me, what is that book about? Like, what's the synopsis? What are the spark notes? I'm blank right now. I truly don't remember. It's, I guess, high time for me to read it again. I don't really remember the nitty gritty pieces of learning, but what I remember is the takeaway feeling that I got. And it was like my mind and my heart opened up this idea that I could have more purpose and I could have more freedom and still be a very high functioning, high performing professional. And so that feeling, as you said, was in stark contrast to, well, at the time, the dread I was probably feeling as I was driving into my night shift ICU job, the exhaustion that I was feeling, the burnout. And so reading this book, I just felt this spark inside, like, okay, there is another way to do things. I can infuse my creativity. I can think outside of the box, and I can find a way to work less hours and still have the same income or more, still have the same impact or more, but have a heck of a lot more fun doing it and a lifetime more freedom.
That's super cool. And I think we're very much aligned there in terms of, what that book did for us. And it also sparked the search for what's the nursing specialty that can be performed from anywhere. We were not searching for something different before we read this book. My path was going to be nurse anesthesia. Your path was nurse practitioner. Eventually,
Mm-hmm.
right? So enter nurse coaching. And, as soon as we found it, we were like, yep, this is it. Like it's literally, there's no other specialty on the planet inside the field of nursing that you can learn so quickly and then be able to set up a home office and start working remotely. Like it was amazing and super, super exciting for us, which I think really provided just an enormous amount of momentum for you and I to be able to start to work remotely 7 or 8 years ago when, let's be honest, internet was still shoddy. Like FaceTime was just beginning to be a real thing. But if Tim Ferriss could do it, then I was like, man, we can probably figure this thing out.
Yeah, let's just keep that mindset through our whole life. If Tim Ferriss can do it, then we can probably figure it out. And we'll just keep thinking that way for every mentor we've ever had along the way.
I mean, we're just all humans, right? And when I think about these people, pretty much everybody is of average intelligence. There's a few people that I admire that are way above and beyond, but for the most part, we're just average humans who, figured out a pathway or followed a process or learned from a mentor to do something differently.
The thing that resonated with me about that book was the takeaway message was not just, hey, go find a way to work as little as you possibly can and then call it good. It wasn't about working a 4-hour work week for the sake of only working 4 hours and then going and do nothing at all and being lazy. It was about maximizing what you do in a short period of time so that you can spend the rest of your time in the way that you truly want to. That's that freedom piece. And so for us, from the very beginning, when we started to build and design our business, we designed it in service of the lifestyle that we wanted to have. We thought about, what are our values? What are the things that are most important to us? And if we're going to find a way to work less hours or to work remotely or to break outside of the box, what are the benefits that we're hoping to achieve on the other side of that? Do you remember when we had those conversations? I mean, way, way, way back years and years ago.
Yeah, for sure. What's interesting is that it did take time for it to catch up, right? So you have this idea of, okay, so I could work remotely. I have a specialty inside of nursing that's going to allow me to do that. The internet's going to allow me to do that. I have a webcam that's going to allow me to do that. And I have to build this thing first in order to be able to build that lifestyle. But we always did have that lifestyle in mind. And what that really meant for me was having more freedom to practice creatively. And, for anyone listening right now, I'm curious, when you think about your ideal lifestyle, if you think about your ability, like, okay, I have this specialty of nurse coaching, and I also have this beautiful thing called the internet and technology. And when those two are fused together, then I can work remotely anywhere as a nurse coach. Awesome. So what is the reason that is so interesting to you? Is it to have more freedom? Okay. Freedom for what? Is it freedom to travel? Is it freedom to spend time with your family? Is it freedom to not have to check in with a boss who complains every time you're a minute and a half late to work? Is it freedom to create your own schedule? Is it freedom to work with clients that you love? Maybe it's all those things, but what is it for you? What are the things that you value that you want to design, when thinking about, okay, yeah, I get to build this home office, but why?
Yeah, Peter, and thank you for speaking to that, because I think what we have experienced over and over again is that the nurses and nurse coaches in our community, they are able to identify that they would like to create their own practice. They would like to work remotely so that they can have more time and more freedom. And those are like these kind of abstract buzzwords floating around. So the more intentional we can be with going deeper and asking ourselves those questions of, well, more time for what? More freedom for what? The more detail we can build out that vision with, then the more success we're going to have in creating a business that's helping us to build and sustain that lifestyle that we're creating. So you mentioned that for you, your biggest driver was the freedom to practice creatively. Can you say a little bit more about that, and why was that so important for you at that time?
It was so important to me at that time to be able to practice more creatively because I was ready to work in a way that wasn't so driven by exacting protocols. And I was ready to learn. I was that book opened up this hunger, this deep hunger for me to learn something that I was interested in learning. And that was key because as I was considering going back to school for anesthesia, I did not want to learn that stuff. It was no longer exciting to me when I was sitting there calculating and titrating 20 different drips for an open heart patient. That stuff was no longer exciting to me. What was exciting to me was, how can I help people to help themselves? And that sounds so cliche, but how can I coach somebody to transform their life and their lifestyle and their health and their happiness in a way that's like creative and fun and dynamic, where no conversation's ever the same? And how can I combine that with, for me, it was entrepreneurship. Many nurse coaches, they don't want to start their own business, but you can still get a remote job as a nurse coach, and be able to work remotely. And your employer, as long as you have a cool background, they're never going to know where you're at. Life hack, get a VPN and you can be inside the United States, technically, no matter where you are. But yeah, for me, it was really just about that super intense level of just desire to be really, really creative and to unleash that ability inside of me to just see what could happen when I was creative with my clients and when I was creative as an entrepreneur.
That makes a lot of sense, because you are by nature a creative person. You have that entrepreneurial spirit. You are a musician. So I can appreciate how being inside of a role where you're feeling like you are in a box or following protocols would be particularly challenging for someone like you.
It was not until it was.
Yeah.
Like it was like once the veil was pulled from my eyes, then it did become challenging to be inside that role. But for many, many years, I had a lot of fun working at the bedside as a nurse.
Well, sure. That's the value of one insight, right? One conversation, one book that you read, one insight, and then boom, it's the catalyst that now the rest of your life has changed because that veil is lifted and you see everything differently.
Let's go. What was it for you? What did freedom in working remotely as a nurse coach, why was that so important to you?
Well, I have a very vivid memory of, it must have been like 10 years ago at this point. And for those who know us at this point, know that we have a 1-year-old son at home right now who has slowly but surely become our world. Well,
Just
10
turned
years ago,
one yesterday.
Just turned
Happy
one
birthday,
yesterday.
little baby.
Toddler now officially, I think. Anyways, I digress. 10 years ago, I did not have that family. I did not have that vision of that family. I didn't know if I was ever going to be a mom, ever have kids, but I must have somehow seen the future in my mind, because I remember sitting in the nurse's station and I watched a nurse, actually there were two nurses on the unit who were very, very pregnant, walked down the hall, and they're kind of wearing their feelings about it on their sleeve as they have their big, almost 9-month bellies, and they're walking down. I just remember sitting there and thinking, when and if I get to that point in my life, in my future, and I am pregnant, I do not want to be in this nursing environment. Not because I didn't like it in that moment, but because I thought, when I see my future as somebody on the verge of creating a family, and when I envision myself with a teeny tiny baby at home, I do not want to be working in the hospital. I don't know why that was so important to me 10 years ago, but it flooded me. And once I had that feeling, I could not shake it. And so it was almost like I had this deep value of time freedom to be with my family and freedom to really control my destiny by choosing where I was able to be physically present, but also mentally and emotionally present in what, at that time I was envisioning was going to be this most important moment. And turns out, fast forward 10 years, it is a very important moment in time. And I'm so grateful that I have been able to work remotely and be pretty much home, working very hard, but yes, pretty much home for all of these incredible moments of our son's first year.
I love that you have had that, as a husband, as a dad, as a partner, you being able to spend maximal amount of time with our newborn son while he grows up in his first year. I mean, that's what every mom wants, right? Is to be able to have that time. And because as they say, it goes fast. And so, so and so true, but I really appreciate the fact that you've been able to have that. And I also love some of the memories that we've created, because one of our big values is traveling, and working remotely obviously is the ultimate hack. I didn't know that you could. The 4-hour work week isn't what turned me on to traveling while working. Instead, it was actually a really good friend of mine, a colleague that I met while working at a co-working space when we first got started, and we were coming up together, and he was a lawyer and I was getting my practice started. And he was like, "Yo, man, it's awesome to meet you. I'm taking off. I'll be back in a few months." I was like, "What? You just started your business. Where are you going, dude?" And he was going to Portugal for a few months. And that was the first time I'd heard the term digital nomad and just getting out there. And, that also began our journey of being able to travel all over the world and being able to work remotely. And we've been able to go to South and Central America, more islands than we can count. Turns out
We love islands.
love islands. Europe. We were in New Zealand when you were like 6 or 7 months pregnant. And it turns out New Zealand has ridiculously good internet service all over. Like, you'll be in the
Amazing.
middle of nowhere, you guys. In the middle of nowhere, you set up shop in your little camper van, you put on your hotspot, and boom, you have like 5G internet. I was totally blown away.
Better than in our home office sometimes, if I'm being honest.
Sometimes,
Yes.
for sure. Yeah. What we've learned is, if you're going to travel and work remotely, there are a few hacks and a few tricks that have really gotten us through it. So yeah, Heather, maybe you want to walk us through a couple of the hacks that you've learned in order to successfully work remotely as a nurse coach.
One of the biggest hacks that you played a large part in helping me learn is because I've always been an avid traveler. I love traveling. I love to go, go, go. I'm the type of person who, if I have 2 weeks, then I'm going to go as many different places and see as much as I can possibly see. That's sort of always been my MO. Turns out, if you try to continue to do that while also working remotely, it can be a bit of a challenge. So one of the biggest hacks and learning points that you and I have come to together is the art of traveling slow. And so as you're listing off all of these places that we have been, we haven't been there for just a moment or two, just a few days or just a few weeks. We've actually had the ability to take our work with us remotely and spend an entire month in Africa, spend an entire month in the Dominican Republic, really slowing down to be in each of these places. And so on the one side, we've then got this benefit of really being able to set up our new home office, so to speak, in this remote location. But you also get the additional benefit of really soaking in the culture and getting to slow down and kind of create a new home in another place for a while. So the number one biggest hack that we learned for how to work remotely and travel and be successful was to slow down. As we always say, slow down to speed up, slow down to really be more successful.
We were recounting this story before this episode, and in our heads it was like, oh yeah, just a few months after we started our business we took off. It was actually a full 18 months after starting our business before we had our first international trip. It's just that startup phase can sometimes feel like this black void where you only remember bits and pieces because there's so much happening. So yeah, if you are planning on, experiencing ultimate freedom working remotely, if you are starting your own thing, if you're working remotely for somebody else, it's going to be like pretty instant. You can get up, move around, just go set up shop pretty much anywhere you want to be, and you're good to go. If you're planning on building your own thing, friends, make sure that you have it at least reasonably stable before you take off jet setting. Something that has worked really well for me and Heather is to kind of think about it like a bicycle. So like on one part, like when we're home, we are pedaling a lot harder. We're working, we wake up, we have our little routine, we do our morning routine, and then we go into our very non-glamorous little rooms with our sit to stand desks, and we just hustle. We get our work done. But then when we go travel now, if we're going to travel for 4 to 6 weeks, then we kind of coast, right? So we pedal less hard and we work less hard when we're on the road. And that's something that has really worked well for us over the past many years, and something that I continue to see in our future. But yeah, friends, if you're wanting to get things started, make sure that you get your business to a good place. Otherwise, you're going to be in this beautiful location. And I've had this happen to me where I'm in a beautiful location, like the beach is right there, and I'm so freaking stressed out because I didn't get done what I needed to get done in order to be able to give myself also that freedom of being able to turn off.
So if you happen to meet Peter or myself out in the wild, you might ask us, hey, which mode are you on? Are you on hustle mode these days, or are you on coast mode? Because that may determine a slightly different version of ourselves who you get to encounter based on the time and the season of our life. So number one, we found that when you do travel, it's super helpful to slow down and really take your time in that place. That's really going to set you up for success to work remotely as a nurse coach while traveling. The other piece is to have super solid, reliable gear that you can bring with you, that you're comfortable with, and that works. So for us, that pretty much looks like having a laptop. We can pretty much always get an international cell plan for backup. And sometimes we need a fancy camera, we need a little microphone for something like this. But if we're in that coast mode and we've set ourselves up for success, then you just want to make sure you have that very, very basic gear to take care of your business, to take care of your clients. That way you're not putting yourself in a stressful situation where you are scrambling at that last moment to make everything work.
Friends, this goes for whether you are traveling internationally or just working from your home office. Like, these are just basic tips that we have been using. And so step number one really is to have solid gear and to have a space set up where you can be focused and undistracted. I always have my phone charged up to the max because even here, working at home in the US, internet just randomly goes out. And so like if I'm in the middle of a call and my internet goes out, then I can't use my computer. So I have to use my phone as a hotspot. And so that has just been an absolute clutch thing to have as a backup for us. When we do travel, we travel slow. And really the most important thing of working remotely is to prioritize being a professional. So show up 100%, be focused. Don't be like trying to fold laundry or make lunch for the kids while also being on a client call. Go do those things. Take care of what you need to take care of, but it's not like this is a free pass to just totally mess around, because you're going to suck at what you do. You're not going to be fully present. You're not going to be able to build what you want to build. You need an environment, you need the tools, and you need the space to be able to show up like true professional.
Yeah, and that is a great point, because I think that sometimes working remotely is so foreign to us, and we get so excited about this idea that I can be, on a beach or swinging in a hammock and still take this coaching call, which yes, you can do, but you have to make sure that you're not sacrificing the quality of the service that you're providing, or else sadly someday soon you will no longer have that business if you sacrifice the service that you're providing.
Heck yes, friends. So Heather, anything else that you want to say before we start closing out here?
We have covered all of the amazing reasons to work remotely as a nurse coach, and really how this has opened up an enormous amount of freedom in our lives, freedom to be present with our family, freedom to travel the world. I know that so many nurse coaches are excited about not just having more time, but really taking this business on the road with you. And so hopefully the tips that we have left you with, slowing down, traveling slow, having the right gear, remembering to be professional, are really going to support you on your way. And finally, the point that I will return to is, remember, come back to your why. If you are wanting to work remotely, you're wanting more time and more freedom, ask yourself why. Why are those things really, really, truly important to you? So that as you use nurse coaching to be this pathway to the most epic opportunities for remote work, you can always be creating your practice around that ideal lifestyle that you want to have.
Because there will be moments where it's super challenging, where you feel like giving up, where you feel like this isn't worth the time and the effort, or man, I hate doing this. I'm not into it right now. Whatever challenge or obstacle comes up, if you are connected to your why and the reason why you are pursuing remote work as a nurse coach, then it allows you to move through those obstacles because you have a higher purpose that you're driving towards.
Very well said.
Friends, thanks so much for this amazing time. Heather, thanks for this conversation, y'all. And we'll see you in the next episode.
See you next time.